appointed Chief Justice Walter Onoge stalled. And Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is, of course, on the inconclusive state governorship elections. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission has fixed March the 23rd this year for the supplementary elections in 6 states out of the 29 states where governorship elections were conducted at the weekend. Recall also that elections in Adamawa, Bauchi, Benue, Kano, Plateau, and Sokoto were declared inconclusive after the March 9th elections in those states. Now, the appropriate sections of the Electoral Act, as well as the regulations and guidelines as provided by INEC, stipulate the rules for the conduct of elections, as well as the declaration of a winner for those elections. In particular, a winner cannot be determined where, of course, the difference between the scores of the 2 leading candidates are well below the threshold. Threshold being, of course, the number of registered voters in those locations where the votes didn't take place or the votes were otherwise cancelled. Violence is often a major reason for inconclusive elections. And the solution, more often than not, is a supplementary or rerun election in the affected area. Hence, the line of action by the Independent National Electoral Commission. Furthermore, the Electoral Act also says that supplementary elections have to be conducted within 21 days of the initial polls. The contest will involve all the candidates beyond, of course, the 2 leading candidates on the ballot, which, of course, took place on the 9th of March. INEC has, however, suspended elections in Rivers State, and the recommendations of his committee set up to advise it on the way forward are being expected by the public. INEC and some others involved in the electoral process will, of course, be joining us later on in the program to discuss these issues. It's on that note I'd like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo. We're broadcasting, as always, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, in the course of the program, we'll have our regular companion segments, and these include newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment. Of course, I'm sure that soccer buffs would have watched what happened last night when Juve, of course, came back from 2 goals down to trounced Atletico Madrid. But in the meantime, let's begin the morning news. And here is Abdul Malik Adio as our anchor. Hello, Malik. Did you watch the match?
I did, and I can see the excitement on your face. But we'll do justice the next time we meet.
All right.
Many thanks for joining us. And this is the morning news. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, met on Tuesday, 12th of March 2019, and reviewed the conduct of the 29 governorship and 991 state constituency elections held on 9th March 2019. In all, the Commission declared winners in the governorship elections in 22 states. However, the returning officers in Adamawa, Bauchi, Benue, Kano, Plateau, and Sokoto State declared the governorship elections inconclusive. A statement signed by the Independent National Commission Information and Voter Education, Festus Okoye, indicates that the Commission will conduct supplementary elections on Saturday, the 23rd March 2019 to conclude the process. Supplementary elections will also hold in polling units in all states where state assembly elections were declared inconclusive and winners could not be declared. Details of the constituencies, including number of polling units and registered voters, will be published on INEC's website on Wednesday, 13th March 2019. The elections were declared inconclusive for a combination of reasons, mainly the discontinuation of the use of smart card readers midway into the elections or failure to deploy them, overvoting and widespread disruption in many polling units. Furthermore, the Commission has considered a report submitted by the resident Electoral Commissioner for Bauchi State on the disruption of the collation at the Tafawa Balewa Local Government Collation Center, which led to the cancellation of results for the entire local government area. The commission found that there are issues that need further investigation and has set up a team led by the National Commissioner to resolve them. President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the constitution of 2019 Inter-Ministerial Presidential Inauguration Committee. A statement signed by the Permanent Secretary, General Service Office, indicates that the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, will lead the committee as chairman. Members of the committee include Minister of Information and Culture, Minister of Interior, Foreign Affairs, FCT, Defense, Health, Education, and the Minister of State Aviation. Other members include the National Chairman of the All Progressives Congress, the Acting Inspector General of Police, Director General Department of State Security Service, Commander Brigade of Guards, among others. The committee's team of reference is to plan, organize and execute all approved activities for the 2019 presidential inauguration, among others. The committee is expected to be inaugurated on Thursday, 14th of March 2019 at 5 p.m. at the SGF's conference room. And President Muhammadu Buhari is back in Abuja after a 5-day visit to Daura, Katsina State. The president, accompanied by his wife Aisha Buhari, was received at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport by his Chief of Staff Abba Kyari and the Minister of FCT Mohammed Musa Bello and other senior government officials. While in Daura, his ancestral home, President Muhammadu Buhari exercised his democratic right by voting in the governorship and state assembly elections. And before departing for the nation's capital, the Nigerian leader received in audience the Emir of Daura, Umar Farouk Umar, on his solidarity visit. The Emir led prominent title holders to formally rejoice with President Muhammadu Buhari over the renewed mandate, as well as continued sacrifice for sustainable development of the country. Prayers were offered to God for guidance, protection, and wisdom to enable the president execute his people-centered policies and programs on the next level. President Muhammadu Buhari has granted audience to the governors of the All Progressives Congress on congratulatory visit as celebrations over the renewal of his mandate continue across the country. The governors were led by the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Governor of Zamfara State, Abdulaziz Yari Abubakar. In attendance at the high-level engagement with the president include the governors of Kaduna, Kogi, Kebbi, Borno, Ekiti, and Jigawa State. Details of the discussions, which lasted about 1 hour behind closed doors, were not made public. Governor Abdulaziz Yari of Zamfara State, however, told NTA News that President Muhammadu Buhari deserves not only congratulations on his re-election, but continued support, understanding, and cooperation as he strives to execute the next level agenda for Nigeria.
To congratulate Mr. President on his overwhelming victory on his re-election on 23rd February 2019. That's the main mission of this high-power delegation.
So what have you discussed with the president apart from that?
No, we're discussing about the development of our party. You know, we have been control of about 25 before exit of Kwara, Benue, and Sokoto. And we're looking at the outcome of gubernatorial election held 4 days ago.
In the meantime, wife of the president, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, has expressed gratitude to Nigerian women and youth for their support towards the re-election of President Muhammadu Buhari during the February 2019 general elections. This was at a dinner in Daura, the hometown of the president, organized by Mrs. Buhari under the auspices of Women in Youth's Presidential Campaign Team.
I would like to thank the Daura people and the entire people of Katsina State for their maximum support. For 16 years, there are so many people that are here tonight that never changed their mind right from inception or right from the day my husband joined politics up to today. We thank them so much. May God reward them.
And the Buhari Media Organization says President Muhammadu Buhari will, at the end of his second term and final term in office, be good to Nigerians a very robust democratic space that many Nigerians will be proud of. In a statement by its chairman, Niyi Akinsiju, and secretary, Cassidy Maduike, BMO says this is obvious from the president's deliberate non-interference in the just concluded governorship and state House of Assembly elections. Buhari did not go out of his way to ensure that the All Progressives Congress, APC, got undue advantage in last Saturday's election. The group, who said President Muhammadu Buhari deserves credit for the principled stand, also pointed out that the president's non-interference shows that he is a true Democrat that keeps to his words, adding that President Muhammadu Buhari is on record to have said that Nigerians were free to vote for political parties of their choice. At the time, key APC members were openly expressing support for governorship candidate on the platform of the other parties. Therefore, it is not surprising that the results so far announced by INEC officials largely reflected the will of the people, regardless of whether APC won or not. An Emir of Kano, Malam Muhammad Sanusi II, has asked the people of Kano State to remain steadfast and supportive to democratic processes. The Emir made the plea in a special broadcast to the people of the state on the need to live in peace irrespective of political differences.
We urge the people of Kano to remember that our great state has a reputation and the world is watching us. We should avoid any actions that will bring this state to ridicule and reduce the esteem with which other people hold Kano.
And the Code of Conduct Tribunal has adjourned the trial of the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onogen, on alleged forced declaration of asset to Monday, the 18th of March 2019. The chairman of the tribunal, Danladi Umar, gave the order at the resumed trial of the matter Tuesday in Abuja.
But I took notice of the blood pressure as stated by the doctor. So I will not now start making comments on that.
Somebody is ill, and the doctor certified that he is not fit to be in court. What does that imply? It says the man is not fit.
Senate reconvened after its 2 weeks extended recess and adjourned 1 hour later. The adjournment was in honor of late member of the House of Representatives, Temitope Olatoye, who lost his life during the governorship and state House of Assembly election in Oyo State.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, in keeping with our tradition and convention in this Senate and indeed in the National Assembly, that when a sad event of this nature takes place, we normally suspend plenary and indeed all parliamentary activities in respect of the demise of any of our colleagues.
In respect of the Honourable Member, to adjourn all our proceedings and activities today, and secondly, to observe 1 minute silence. Gentle soul, rest in perfect peace. Amen.
Similarly, the House of Representatives has expressed sadness over the shooting of Representative Olatoye Temitope on the 9th of March, which led to his death. The lawmaker urged authorities to fish out and bring perpetrators to justice.
He lost his life on the election day after voting, and no one should die in those circumstances.
It's sad to see Sugar go. He was a quiet, gentle, but effective member of the House.
And that's the morning news. Do enjoy the program. Kinsley.
All right, welcome back, and now it's time for us to take some business stories, and here is our correspondent, Kunle Adeyeye.
The federal government in the last 3 years has committed handsome amount to improvement of power generation and road construction. A professor of capital market, Uche Uwaleke, said this feat should be maintained as it will complement the diversification drive of the federal government and create jobs. He also implored government to scale up some of its social intervention programs.
Massive investment in infrastructure. Okay, I am pleased that this government is turning attention to infrastructure. And of course, it's one of the cardinal programs we have in the EROGP, ensuring self-sufficiency, not only in food production in terms of agri, but also ensuring that we have adequate power. We have good roads and we have rail. So if we have infrastructure, you find out that the other sectors of the economy will be enabled.
In another development, following the satisfactory progress Nigeria achieved in the latest ratings by Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, Executive Secretary of NAITI, Waziri Adio, said this will attract investors to the country.
This is something, apart from other benefits of, this is the feel-good factor, right? That we should all be happy that they are saying something good about our country. It also has the potential of increasing investment in that sector. It also has the potential of that more openness in that sector, which will lead to more revenues coming to government, which will lead to the government using the money for things that matter to the people. And you can just see the multiplier effect down the road. So this is very important for so many reasons that even what we can say now.
And next is the graphic representation of Tuesday's tradings on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
All right, thank you very much, Kunle, for the update on the business. Newspaper review is next for us on Good Morning Nigeria. Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atebe, is right here with us in the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Kinsley. Strange, you are alone today.
Well, as the saying goes, sometimes stuff happens.
Good morning.
Otherwise, it's okay. I'm solo on the program. Now, the 6 papers that we have this morning all have their lead stories, as it were, on the outcome of the governorship elections that took place last Saturday, and in particular, the rescheduling of the inconclusive governorship elections. Let's take a look, for instance, at the Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune has it with a kicker, inconclusive poll. Kano, Bauchi, Sokoto, and others no fate March 23rd. And you have a number of riders there. INEC's fact-finding team meets PDP AAC candidates in Rivers. Rivers political situation worrying. That's according to Peter Obi, who was the running mate to Atiku Abubakar in the presidential election. PDP's Ishaku and Ihedioha win Taraba and Imo polls. 7 APC governors keep mum after meeting with Buhari. Emir of Kano speaks on inconclusive poll, calls for calm. Now, for the Daily Sun newspaper, as I said, it's also the lead story coming with a kicker. As INEC fixes supplementary polls in Kano and 5 others, Tambuwal, Ganduje, Otom, and others no fate March 23rd. The number of riders to that. Election Commission probes disruption of Bauchi results collation. Women protest in Sokoto as third force plans nationwide demonstration. INEC goofed in Adamawa, that's according to the PDP. Supplementary elections shouldn't hold where electoral fraud occurred, that's according to the APC. And the photograph on the front page of the Daily Sun there shows women demanding the reversal of the decision to declare the Sokoto state governorship election inconclusive, as well as the declaration of the candidate of the PDP, who is the incumbent governor, as winner. That took place, of course, in Sokoto yesterday. For the New Telegraph, again, is the lead story. New Telegraph says inconclusive governorship polls, 609,197 voters to decide on Tom Ganduje, Tambuwal, and others' fate. Now, the writers, of course, will focus on, says INEC fixes supplementary elections. All of that we've read from the other papers. Now, there are some 3 photographs on the front page of the New Telegraph, which are pretty interesting. Army rescues INEC had ad hoc staff in Abia and Cross River. You can see the photographs there of the ad hoc staff. It says ad hoc staff of INEC after being rescued at Ohafia. That's the first photograph on the left. The middle photograph shows suspected ballot box snatchers who were arrested by the troops, and abducted members of corps members on election duties also rescued by the troops. Daily Trust also has the same story, as well as the Punch newspaper. Daily Trust, of course, follows up with infographics illustrating where the inconclusive elections took place, together, of course, with a comparison of what happened in 2011, 2013, 2015, 2018, and 2019. Of course, all of these have to do with both the general elections and then off-cycle elections. Bayo.
Yes. The 2 election results have been released. That's how the Governor Darius Isiaku of Taraba State polled 520,432 to beat Alhaji Sani Danladi, who scored 362,735. Governor Darius Isiaku has said the victory is for all the people of Taraba, and we must celebrate with caution as brothers and sisters, and we should eschew violence. The dusk to dawn curfew that was imposed on Jalingo has been extended to 24 hours. In Imo State, Emeka Ihedioha of the People's Democratic Party won the gubernatorial election. He polled 273,404 to beat Uche Nwosu, who scored 190,364. This brings to 22 the number of gubernatorial elections that have been so far released. You recall also that 6 gubernatorial elections have become inconclusive, and those are the ones that INEC says are scheduled now for the 23rd of March. Elections for the governorship and House of Assembly, elections that were held on March 23rd, some of them were inconclusive, and they will all be conducted on March 29th. Of the 29 governorship...
Sorry, Bayo, take it again. Elections held on March 9th.
March 9th,
yes.
yes.
And then the supplementary elections March 23rd.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The details show that there are now 6 states where there will be the inconclusive election will have their rerun. Details of the State of Assembly for elections for the National Assembly will be published by INEC today. Meanwhile, the Emir of Kano, Muhammad Sanusi II, has called for calm on the situation in Kano. He appealed to all members that they should appreciate and trust the INEC and security agencies, and people should cooperate and conduct themselves peacefully. He assured the citizens that the candidates will square up for the area where the results were inconclusive. Meanwhile, the National Assembly resumed plenary yesterday, 2 months after adjourning. It may be recalled that when they resumed a fortnight ago, only 10 senators showed up, and therefore they couldn't form a quorum. But yesterday, about 40 senators turned up, and they had to adjourn by mayor of precedence to pay respect to one of their colleagues, a member of the House of Representatives from Oyo State, who was killed. Meanwhile, they are primed today to set to debate on the 2019 budget, and they are going to discuss details of the budget. By next week, by Tuesday, it will be referred to subcommittees of the National Assembly, particularly the appropriations, and they will have a period of 1 week by which they will now refer them to the Appropriations Committee for deliberations. There is also 1 week given to the National Minimum Wage Committee, and a new ad hoc chairman has been appointed, and they have 1 week to turn in the results. At the House of Representatives, they also resumed plenary yesterday, but they had to adjourn in honor of Temitope Olatui, alias Sugar, who was killed in Oyo. Police in Oyo State, they have arrested one of the killers, suspected killers of Honorable Olatoye. They are also after the others. But meanwhile, the Ninth Assembly Caucus of the All Progressive Congress also met yesterday. So far, the distribution of the election result for the House of Representatives, according to the Punch, indicates that 211 members of the All Progressive Congress, 111 are for the People's Democratic Party. APGA had 6 members, while the Action Democratic Congress has 3. Also, the Action Alliance has 2 members. Democratic PRP, People's Redemption Party, has 2, while African Democratic Party, Allied People's Movement, and Social Democratic Party each have 1 member each. So there's a multi-representation in the House of Representatives.
That will be in the ninth National Assembly.
And already the caucus of the House of Representatives already indicated that they will bow to the authority of the party to guide them about the leadership contest that will come for the Ninth Assembly.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. That will be only in June. That's about 3 months away. Now, let's return to our papers. The Punch newspaper, above the nameplate, you have a number of busy headlines, of course, along with 2 earpieces beside the name flag. Federal government released 7.3 trillion naira for recurrent and capital expenditure in 2018. That's according to the CBN. Details of that can be found on page 21. Now, Senate begins budget debate, raises new minimum wage bill committee. Bayo has already discussed that. Details can be found on page 8. Honore appeals against CCT's refusal to rule on its objections. That's page 3. We are compiling reports on Nigerian elections. That's according to the U.S. Now, EFCC reopens Erastus Akimbola's 10-year-old trial. That's page 7. And air crash, no Boeing 737 MAX operating in Nigeria, says federal government. That's page 7. Of course, I have a number of stories on the MAX 737 that I will take from other papers, but let me just exhaust the other stories on the front page of the Punch. That's below the photographs there. You have Akpabio and Akwa Ibom PDP trade words over governorship poll results. Soldiers kill 55 bandits, rescue 760 from Zamfara forest. Page 8. Articles appeal. Opposition parties claiming to have leaked names of panel members. That's on page 10. Now, for Daily Trust newspaper, below the nameplate of Daily Trust newspaper, you have the headline, a story on the Boeing 737. It says, more countries ground Boeing 737 MAX as Nigeria allays fears. And Taraba extends curfew on Jalingo to 24 hours. That's page 6. On page 12, reps to revisit Electoral Act rejected by Buhari. Details of that story can be found on page 12. Bayo, just quickly, let me also go to the New Telegraph newspaper. Excuse me, New Telegraph newspaper. Above the nameplate of New Telegraph, Ethiopia crash. That's the kicker. No airline operates Boeing 737 MAX 8 in Nigeria. Again, coming from the federal government. And says death of 3 Nigerians devastating. And insurance claims may go up $60 million. You have 2 other headlines below the nameplates out of the 4 there. Boko Haram, military destroys 70 gun trucks and fuel dumps. That's page 9. And father drugged and defied 12-year-old daughter, doctor tells court. Bayo, I think basically those are the stories. Leadership also has the same stories that we're talking about in terms of the composition of the Election Petition Tribunal. It says, that's the Leadership newspaper. APC and opposition parties bicker over composition of election tribunal. They were handpicked by APC, that's a claim by CUPP. Then claim an insult on judiciary, governing party fires back. Bayo, let's discuss the stories and then we'll return
let's
to
start with the judiciary now. Justice Onoge was not at the Code of Conduct Tribunal yesterday. He was diagnosed of having toothache and high blood pressure, and due to a doctor's report, he was advised to have 72 hours bed rest. Consequently, he was not in court. Meanwhile, Justice Onoge has appealed against the decision of the Code of Conduct Tribunal to defer ruling on his initial objection to the end of the trial. And that appeal has been filed at the Court of Appeal. Meanwhile, the grave displeasure has been expressed by the Director General of the Center for Women Development, especially about women participation in the last concluded elections. She actually charged that governments and parties need to give women more opportunities for leadership. But if you do an overview of the elections, one will find out that 80 female candidates squared up against 987 male candidates for 29 gubernatorial seats. This is about 1 to 12 or 7.5%. All states had female candidates as governorship candidates except Borno, Katsina, and Plateau. Now, if you look at the breakdown generally, one will find out that there's a Change Advocacy Party that had a female gubernatorial candidate and also female running mate. Two parties had that in Delta, one in Imo and the other one in Enugu. When it comes to female running mates, Kano had 9, the highest. Delta had 8, Lagos had 7, Oyo had 6, Enugu had 5, Imo, Rivers had 4 each. Zamfara had 2, Sokoto had 2, Kwara had 2, and Kebbi had 1. When it came to the running mates, female, there were 275 who contested as running mates to governors. And the oldest female contestant was about 69. The oldest male contestants were also of 2 categories. Both were of the age of 75. The oldest was a deputy governor, age 76. Among the too young to wrong, the youngest governorship candidate was age 30, and there were 4 of them who were contesting. The youngest deputy governor candidates were age 20, and also in that category, there were 3 of them. And so that shows that at least the not too young to run is already taking effect. You have some of them who took the advantage of the amendment of the age range in the Electoral Act.
That's right.
Imo State, it will interest you, had as many as 70 candidates contesting the gubernatorial elections, the highest in the country.
Absolutely, it was the highest.
Yes, and Yobe had at least 13 of them.
13, of course. No doubt about that, Bayo. Very interesting stats that you have read with regard to the profiles of those who contested for the elections on the 9th of March. Very quickly, taking a look at the Daily Sun newspaper, we'll go to the foot of the paper to take a couple of headlines. It says, Buhari back in Abuja meets 7 governors. That's page 10. Rivers polls, soldiers barred us from collation center. That's according to EU Observer Mission. Assert your independence, PDP tells INEC. Details can be found on page 41. And Bayo, let's take our editorial. It's also coming from the Daily Sun newspaper, and it's at page 15. The editorial says, time to move forward. And the editorial begins, says, our quadrennial election cycle has come and gone. The country has renewed the mandate of President Muhammadu Buhari and strengthened the control of the National Assembly by the APC. Now, while some of the results of the governorship and state assembly elections have been released, others are still being expected. Sadly, the elections were characterized by unprecedented violence and voter apathy. And then, of course, the editorial concludes that President Buhari should strive to fulfill his campaign promises and lead by example.
Yes, indeed, the editorial is happening on the fact that every 4 years election cycle, one has gone, and looking forward, campaigns are over now, and what remains is governance, and therefore is appealing to President Muhammadu Buhari to leave a legacy behind during his second term. He says that reckoning must be given to federal character, particularly coming to appointment, and also run an inclusive government. You know, the presidential system is characterized by winner-take-all, and that engenders a lot of discomfiture, particularly within the political class, because it means if you are out, you have to wait for another 4 years, and therefore people are advocating for inclusiveness. The other area which the editorial is happening on is that there's tremendous improvement in the area of infrastructure, and this should be harped upon, particularly with the areas of trains, major highways, railroads, and bridges, particularly the second Niger bridge, so that a tremendous legacy can be left behind. Security, they said there have been improvement, but there are still challenges. In the papers we read earlier on, you heard about the bandits that have been routed in Zamfara, to the extent that about 700 people have been released from them. In the same way, the multinational joint task force has been decimating the Boko Haram, particularly in the northeast, in the last 2 weeks. And that is tremendous, but it's still insecurity, particularly coming from the insurgency and also armed banditry across the country, armed robbery and kidnapping are all on the increase, and something has to be done about that. They commend the initiatives of the government and says that time to build a nation, time for reconciliation is now, and the president must lead as the father of the nation.
All right, Bayo, thanks a lot. Just one quick point about the usual calls for either government of national unity, as it's often called, or inclusive government. You always hear that after every round of general elections. And this is a major fallout, as you rightly observe, of the kind of electoral system that we are running. It's called first past the post. One of its spin-off is to create almost invariably two contending parties. You have that example, for instance, in the US, and it is different from the proportional representation. Now, it is at the liberty of the victorious party under our current electoral system, whether or not, to invite persons from other political parties. It's winner take all. But if it were proportional representation, then other political parties that make a certain threshold in terms of the scores of the election would, as of right, will have a percentage, of representation, either in the assembly or in cabinet, depending on the way the constitutional provisions are framed. So it's one thing that we probably will have to return to, because one of the major assignments under the electoral reform system, which the late President Yar'Adua gave the Uwais Committee, was to consider proportional representation. Unfortunately, that issue was sidestepped. And then when it came to the 2014 political conference, it was also sidestepped. It's almost inevitable that we'll return to it, because our elections are costly, for all, so winners and losers. And so you can see the level of desperation, therefore, for people to get in, have their foot not just at the door, but also be inside the room where they can, have a say in governance.
Yes. Actually, the presidential system, winner take all, tend to engender this philosophy of pull him down. You try to bring down the house because you see yourself as on the opposition. Although in the presidential system, it's supposed to be a multi-party or majority party and minority party working together to move the nation forward. But what we have here in our own nation here is a carryover from our initial parliamentary system. And so here you have a very strong minority that believes that it is in opposition, and its duty is to bring down the government. They are even sometimes they've talked about passing the vote of confidence in government, even in the National Assembly, when there is nothing like that as far as our Constitution is concerned. So for going forward, I think the silver lining here is that before the elections were concluded, you have several of the 91 political parties endorsing one candidate or the other. So therefore, you can see that by the time the government is settling down, you can see a cross across parties by way of appointment and engagement. And this, I think, will broaden the scope of appointment across political parties.
All right, Bayo Atoyebe, thank you very much for being with us today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Tomorrow will be another day. Thank you.
Okay, so that does it for our newspaper review segment on Good Morning Nigeria. We're taking a short break now. When we return, of course, our focus is on inconclusive elections, particularly at the state level, namely the governorship. All right, welcome back. And still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Of course, we're getting into our conversation segment, and my colleague already has joined me. Of course, she'll be participating in the interaction with our guests in our conversation segment. That's Jume Yusuf. Jume, good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Kisley.
All right, so let's, of course, get the prompt for this conversation by joining our correspondent, Timothy Yusuf, with the background.
6 states declared inconclusive include Plateau, Adamawa,
Bauchi, Benue, Sokoto, and Kano states. In Plateau State, the margin of a lead of 44,929 between the APC and the PDP candidate is less than 49,377 cancelled votes. Simon Lalong of APC polled a total of 583,225 votes, while Jerry Husseini of PDP scored 538,326 and 471 votes, above 334,995 of Jibril Abindo of the APC, thereby leaving the margin of 32,476, with cancelled votes standing at 40,988. In Bauchi State, Senator Bala Mohammed of the PDP polled 469,512, ahead of 465,453, scored by Mohammed Abubakar of the APC. Cancelled votes in the election is 45,312.
In line with sections 26 and 53 of the Electoral Act, and because the margin of lead is not in excess of the total number of registered voters, I declare this election inconclusive.
Samuel Otom of the PDP in Benue State scored 410,576, ahead of Emmanuel Jime of the APC, who polled 329,022, leaving the margin of 81,544, with cancelled votes standing at 121,019. In Kano State, Abba Yusuf of the PDP polled 1,014,474 votes, ahead of 987,819, scored by Abdullahi Umar Ganduje of the APC. There is a margin of 26,655 votes in between them, while cancelled votes stood at 128,572. Aminu Waziri Tambuwal of the PDP in Sokoto scored 489,558 votes, ahead of APC Saliu Ahmed, who polled 486,145, leaving the margin of 3,413 votes between them. The number of cancelled votes in the election stood at 75,403.
As a result of this, I cannot conclude on the winner. So I declare this election inconclusive.
Away from the inconclusive election, the Independent National Electoral Commission suspended all electoral processes in Rivers State until further notice. The commission explains that the decision was due to widespread violence in the state during the March 9 governorship and state assembly polls. The commission also claimed some of its staff were held hostage, while materials including result sheets were reportedly destroyed.
The commission decided to suspend all the processes in Rivers State based on credible reports from our field officers to the effect that some of our field officers have been targeted for arrest. Some of them have been kidnapped.
All right, Timothy Yusuf, thank you very much for that background. Let's quickly introduce our guests, the familiar faces on electoral matters. First, the Director of Voter Education and Publicity of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Mr. Oluwole Osaze-Oze. Mr. Osaze-Oze, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Okay. Also here with us is the Chairman of Partners for Electoral Reforms, Ezewa Wango. Ezewa, pleasure to welcome you from the field.
Thank you. Good morning.
Okay. And from Port Harcourt, we've been joined also by another regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria. He's a lawyer, Festus Oguche, constitutional lawyer and public affairs journalist. Pleasure to have you join us from Port Harcourt.
Yes, thank you very much, Kingsley. Thank you.
And from our Jos Network Center, our correspondent, Caleb Gochin, will be joining us in this conversation. Caleb?
Good morning.
All right. Well, we're discussing inconclusive elections, and Plateau, of course, is one of the states affected. 6 states, Plateau is one of them. What, from your reportage, were the issues that led to the inconclusive governorship polls on the Plateau?
Yes, thank you, Kingsley. On the Plateau, there were just 2 major reasons why the elections were inconclusive or declared inconclusive. One was overvoting. So it means that more people, more of the ballot came in than those that actually presented themselves for accreditation. And then the second reason was the abandonment or the non-use of the smart card reader. So those were the two major reasons that we found out or we were told by the authorities concerned from this end.
Now, there was also a report, and this came from one of the observer groups. One of the observers was reported to be taking a photograph or a video of some underage voters in one or two of the polling stations, and it seemed to have been assaulted or eventually spirited away. Do you have more details on what actually happened, and if that in any way played a part in a decision taken on that polling unit where the incident was observed?
Kingsley, I'm sure you, this morning I'm not very sure if we have any of those issues here, especially with our correspondents. As I'm here this morning, we've not got, or I have not got that report. If my colleagues have got, I'm sorry, that wasn't made public here. But the issue of underage voting and all that you cannot rule out, especially during the elections. But I'm sorry to say that I don't have any proof of that now to tell you that yes, that happened, or somebody, an observer, was molested or anything of that nature. I'm very sorry that I don't have that information now.
No matter. We'll pause you in the meantime. I'll return to you later in the course of the conversation. Do you mind?
Yes, exactly. And we'll start with our guest here in the studio.
Well, yeah, let's go straight first to Osaze Ozi. Osaze, you know, there are a number of descriptive words that have been used with regard to the elections. What we are dealing with today is inconclusive. Now, in explaining to us why the elections have been declared inconclusive, I would like you to also distinguish inconclusive election from suspended election, which is in Rivers, and then also to explain the remedy for the inconclusive election, and distinguish also supplementary election, rerun election from a runoff.
That's a lot. That's a lot. You want to crash course in constitutional law. Basically, an inconclusive election is an election which they could not be concluded on the first ballot. We could not make a return based on certain things that happened in the field while the election was ongoing. And basically it concerns the deprivation of a certain number of people from voting or the invalidation of votes in a particular polling unit or a particular polling area. Something amiss must have happened for you to have an inconclusive election. So basically, I think reasons were given in the statement issued by the Commission yesterday. If there's basically Section 26 of the Electoral Act talks about where there's violence or threat of violence or a breakdown of law and order, such that it will lead to the suspension of the election in a particular polling unit or particular area. Or it can be natural disasters, but in this case, there was no natural disaster. Force majeure, something that was made by God, not man-made. But usually, in our country, the experience has been that we've dealt with man-made issues leading to suspensions. So you don't want to expose voters, expose media, expose INEC officials to unnecessary danger. Where this is, then you have to suspend the election until such a time that the atmosphere is conducive, the environment is conducive to hold a peaceful election. So that's one. The second one is Section 53 of the Electoral Act, which deals with overvoting, where the total number of ballots at the end of the day, this time the election has gone on, but the total number of votes cast is more than either the total number of registered voters or the total number of people who have been accredited. Now that's a problem. It shows that something has gone wrong. So in both cases, the law says you come back on another day, except, of course, there's a proviso, except, of course, the results in those areas will not make a difference to the overall results. So if there are 100 people who were prevented from voting or who were affected by this overvoting, and the margin of lead, what we call the margin of lead principle, is such that the person leading is has over 500 votes or 1,000 votes, whether you conduct those elections for those 100 people and add it to the runner-up, it will not make a difference to the overall results in terms of who will win that election. So in that case, you can go ahead and conclude the election, as happened in the presidential case. There were lots of issues of overvoting. There were lots of issues of violence in certain areas. Almost 1 million votes were cancelled or nullified by these vices. But because the margin of lead between the person eventually declared the winner and the runner-up was such that even if we were to add the 1 million votes to the runner-up, then it will not make a significant difference. So that's why it didn't happen there. But in smaller constituencies, and because our elections have become a lot more competitive, if there's a landslide with a wide margin, it makes no difference. Because they've become so much more competitive, 3,000 votes, or just over 3,000 in the case of Sokoto, can make such a difference. And I think Bauchi also can make such a difference. So we cannot conclude that election. The returning officer looked at it and said, look, these are the total number of cancelled votes. It far outweighs the margin of lead. So we have to go back and conclude that election. So you conduct a supplementary election. The election you do is supplementary. Is a make-up election to ascertain who actually the winner is. A runoff election has been provided for in the Constitution and has not happened in the presidential election, and as far as I'm aware, not in any state governorship election. Applies to the governorship and presidential election, executive positions. In a legislative, we have what we call first past the post. In other words, who has the majority of vote wins. But for the governorship and for the presidency, apart from scoring the majority of lawful votes, so use the first past the post principle, but you do not make a return unless and until that person has at least 25% score of votes in 2/3 of, in case of local governments, in the state of the president, in the states. And recall, that was what really led to Chief Awolowo, then of the UPN, who took Shagari to court and said, look, no, you scored 25% in 12 states, but not in the 13 states. So what is 2/3 of a state? That led to that 12 and 2/3 argument. So in that case, that is called a run-off election between the person who scored the highest number of votes cast, the leading person, and then the second person with the highest number of votes in the local governments or in the states. That's basically the distinction between both.
Yeah, and Jumai, just before you come in, again, for the benefit of our viewers, that tells you that a runoff involves only 2 candidates, assuming you have more than 2 candidates that participated in the election. A supplementary election, obviously, will involve all of those who took part in the election originally.
Who took part originally in the election, yes.
Everybody?
Everybody, yes.
Okay, they said, you know, I was watching Tuesday Live yesterday, and the publicity secretary of INEC said there was meticulous planning for this election. It took 3 years plus to do it. So, do you think the security presence at collation centers were adequate, especially in comparison to those at polling units? And do the scenario in the 6 states where elections were declared inconclusive meet with the requirement for inconclusive?
Let me take the latter first. Absolutely, they do. If they are not the returning officers, we would not have declared them inconclusive. They do meet requirements, as I defined earlier. Yeah. Basically, the margin of lead between the person leading now, who has the highest majority of lawful votes cast, and the person runner-up is so thin that the areas where elections were cancelled will have an impact on the eventual outcome. It might be the same person who's leading, possibly so, or it might be the runner-up who will overtake that person. We cannot say unless and until we conclude that election. And by the way, it's not nothing new. It's happened in all our electoral cycles, all without exception. In Rivers State in 1999, I believe Sergeant Awuche and Peter Odili had to go for that supplementary election because of this kind of thing. I think there was violence. In 2015, it happened in Taraba. It happened in Imo. It happened in Imo in 2011.
But
so,
not on a large scale like we are having it now.
I don't know what you mean by large scale, but I gave you 3 states in 2015. Okay. And you know, 2019, the election has become more competitive. The margins of win or loss between the leading parties, it's now much, much narrower. So the constellations in those are more impactful. So that's possible, unlike in previous elections where margins were wide. We've heard of moonslides and things that were much wider. So because of that competitiveness, if it's what we call one-party states, then you will not have that, because the margin will be so wide that it will make no difference whether you add all those cancelled elections to the second, to the runner-up, and it will make a difference. So the first question as to, sorry,
yes, I asked you security presence at the polling units.
Whether they're adequate. Look, how do I answer this? In many countries, you don't need security presence in collation centers.
They are collation centers.
Yes, you don't need any security.
You don't?
No,
why?
In some countries, because people will go by the rules. They will obey the rules. So they don't need that enforcing state machinery to enforce things, to prevent hoodlums. Hoodlums will not go there and just cut away or destroy materials. But regrettably, we live in a society where the stakes are not higher than any other country, but it's such that security has... But in doing that, you must always strike a balance. Security presence should not be so overwhelming where you have more security people than agents, observers, media, and party agents or officials of the commission. But I think they were adequate. In a case like Rivers, I didn't quite answer that before we ended that. It's a suspended election. Now, in Rivers State, there was security presence, but there was now other security presence which countered. The police is the lead security agency for elections, and the 2015 amendment stated the roles of the security agents and when the army can come in, when armed forces can come in. But make no mistake about it, these police are the lead agency for electoral security. And we had that, and they consolidated and they secured the state collation center and other collation centers. But in between, there were, I can't say now whether they were state actors or non-state actors, but they were in uniforms. Came in there and in some cases overwhelmed the lead agency, the police. We had no problems generally with the police in Rivers State. They conduct themselves professionally and they must be commended for that. But where you see people who now come in large numbers, more or less take over the security of the place and are acting beyond what is supposed to be their professional capacity, then there's a problem. The Army has denied this, the Air Force has denied, but these people were in what we think are Army uniforms of other security agencies.
All right, thank you very much. We'll return to you presently. Ezewan Wangu, let's have your thoughts in the first instance on the number of states where the governorship elections have been declared inconclusive, as well as the reasons for the inconclusive nature of the elections in those places.
I don't, thank you, Kingsley. I don't have concerns about the number of states. I'm more excited about the fact that we are not rewarding misbehavior. When people do things and think that they can be regulated, my sense is that the politicians and their political parties have not been very, very interested in understanding the guidelines for these elections. Or if they do understand, they understand with an intention to breach those things. There are 10 clear grounds for which you do not have to make a call in the election as stipulated in the guideline. To summarize, it will be when there's community conspiracy or community resistance to the smart card reader, when there's violence, where there is overvoting. So the clear thing to do is, from the reports that we have from our observers, were these grounds there? If they were there, should we have overlooked them? If politicians had misbehaved in ensuring that you overvoted. Overvoting means that you have circumvented the laid down procedure for the use of smart card reader. Because if you use the smart card reader, you are not then able to overvote. So when you agree that you are not going to use the smart card reader and throw in the votes, and when it's counted and there is overvoting, what we have is a political class that says, please ignore those things, go ahead. And they have primed the citizenry to think that way as well, that in spite of the misbehavior, in spite of the complete hooliganism that you have seen them perpetrate, that we should just move ahead. And I think that for me is to say that when you have a commission that is saying, no, we are not going ahead. I don't think Osazeuzi and his colleagues will be interested in going back to go and conduct an election. I don't think so. So the thing is that, and I've said this, if you followed, that we are not calling out the politicians and their political parties. When talks go and have a free reign, we don't talk about their principles. We talk about the security that should have stopped them. But we are not saying you that continues to unleash thugs on citizens in a process that is clear, you just stay cool. You are there, relaxed, and we are talking about, oh, the security is not adequate, oh, the INEC people did it. What would they have done in the midst of this kind of milieu? So the politicians and their irresponsibility needs to be called out by every citizen of this country. And we need to encourage the electoral management body to stick to the rules. And what I'm seeing in those states, irrespective, look at, I said here, Delta, for instance. If you looked at the risk map for this election, Delta was in the red. But what did you see? The people of Delta disappointed everyone. They didn't engage in violence. They ensured that they obeyed the rule. So what is the outcome? 900, 200. You therefore cannot say you are not going to conclude that election. Okay? If you go to many states where electoral officials are ambushed, kidnapped, and then you clearly say, look, let's move on. Don't bother about that. Where a deputy governor of a state will go and tear in open camera, tear result sheets in places where you are seeing result snatching. We can't go on like that. We cannot go on like that.
Thank you very much. Your points are noted. Let's go back to Festus Oguche from Port Harcourt. We introduced him a while ago. Mr. Oguche, give us your own perspective on the inconclusive elections and this particular case of Rivers where the election has been suspended.
The issue of inconclusive elections is something that I think one has to take a very deep look at, because I've taken a look at the Electoral Act and I also looked at the guidelines and regulations of INEC for 2019 elections, and I see where INEC is empowered to declare elections inconclusive. To talk about inconclusiveness is to talk about truncation, frustration of a process, to declare a process inchoate, an ongoing process. And I think that such things are matters of exercise of discretion. And when it comes to such exercise of discretion, administrative bodies are empowered under the law to do that. But when it that are of a constitutional nature, then there must be recourse to the courts. To the best knowledge that I know, there are instances that require outright suspension of the polls, deferment of the polls, the urgent situations that will entail, a very urgent. And simply because we have not developed to the stage whereby we come to recognize, and even under our laws, that in elections there are ad hoc judges that are always around to make such things. It's not proper. I think it's even rather dangerous to repose the power to declare elections inconclusive in INEC officials, because it can always be subject to abuse up till this moment, and that's why we have the courts to, I think the normal procedure should have been by way of an ex parte application to whatever, and setting out the facts. And after having listened to whatever, if the judge is of the view that, well, this election should be declared inconclusive, I think it's more of a judicial act than an administrative act, because we are talking about stopping a process in the middle of the road, a process that has already begun. I very much doubt if the procedure we are engaging now is appropriate in the circumstance, because at the end of the day, what we are getting is an abuse of the process. Is happening now. About 6 states have been declared, elections have been declared inconclusive in those areas. What are the justifications for the inconclusiveness? What are the factors responsible for the inconclusiveness? There should be factors that can be verified. And you cannot repose it in a single individual. It must be an act of the judicial discretion. And in the other side, the contestants, the stakeholders in the process. We cannot sacrifice thoroughness on the altar of speed as far as I'm concerned, but to the extent that I know, I think that our election procedure must be governed by law, the rule of law, the principle, the due process of the law. To that level, I would suggest, and I rightly think so, that the necessary amendments be made, the necessary guidelines be put into place to bring in ad hoc judges in the course of conduct of elections to take care of some of these mishaps that could happen, so that these things should be judicially acknowledged and subject to arbitrary considerations. That's my take on that.
Mr. Festus Oguche, if you have recourse to the clear provisions of the Electoral Act, as well as the supplementary legislation by way of the guidelines and regulations provided by INEC for the specific purposes of the 2019 elections, the powers obviously reside in INEC and they exercise those powers administratively. Why, therefore, would you not be calling for a judicial review by way of ex parte orders? Would that not be one, escalating the cost and then also prolonging the process?
If you look at subsection E of the INEC regulations and guidelines, it talks about a candidate having recourse to the courts if he feels that the process has not been fair to him. That is like placing the cart before the horse. I know there are certain provisions that empower administrative bodies, judicial measures. For instance, the ICPC Act empowers the chairman of the ICPC to freeze an account of somebody who is suspected to have reaped the benefits of a crime and what have you. And that it was held to be so. We continued that when the Honorable Justice Ojukwu of the Federal High Court, in interpreting the Presidential Order Number 6, said, no, you cannot tamper with somebody's account without recourse to the courts. So the provisions will be there, but in spite of that, there are measures that cannot be dealt with administratively. The issue of elections, there are constitutional elections in this country are governed by laws, and to declare a process inconclusive, like I said, is to say it's inchoate, it is truncated, and to do that, you have recourse to the courts. And I talked about ad hoc judges. It will not put any expense. The ad hoc judge will always be around. We recall the case of or is it Namibia, where on a Saturday the Electoral Commission went to court to restrain the authorities from cancelling the process, and it was done successfully. So recourse will be had to have this tradition of inconclusive elections is not very healthy for the political development, the democratic development of this country. There are a lot of misgivings to begin to come up, like issues being raised by some political parties that usually when elections are declared inconclusive, there's a magic wand that operates in such manner that the candidate in the lead position now turns to be at the backward position at the end of the polls. And things can be seen to be correct, though, particularly with the Ekiti elections. But that does not mean that these processes are being manipulated, but there should be transparency in the process. And once you talk about transparency, the judicial intervention becomes necessary when a process under the dictates of law, of the Constitution, is said to be inconclusive or is said to be truncated or frustrated along the line. If you look at the regulations and guidelines and the Electoral Act, what it was talking about is suspension of the polls to a later date. We do it regularly in court. You go to court, the matter cannot go on, you adjourn. But to make it inconclusive, well, there's no date yet. We just want to put one or two things together. What are the reasons for the inconclusiveness? Have those reasons been verified? Are they correct? Are they true? And you repose all that in the hands, in the authority of one single individual. It is dangerous.
Mr. Oguche, thank you so much for your input. We'll be coming back to you in the course of the program. I'm coming back to Mr. Osaze. Nigerians have been kept on high jump because of the inconclusive elections, and I'm sure your response is going to align the affairs. It's going to tell them that Nigeria will move forward come 23rd March. What is your response to the issues that he has raised so far?
Thank you. Perhaps Mr. Oguche has not adverted his mind to the clear provisions of the law. Sections 26 and 53 of the Electoral Act as amended that I referred to earlier gives INEC that discretion. It doesn't say it's a judicial discretion. Gives the administrative body, the election management body, that unless INEC is satisfied, mentions INEC specifically, both Section 26 and 53, unless INEC is satisfied that these election, the results can be declared without recourse to a further election in those areas. Clearly. And now INEC has gone ahead, based on those and its powers conferred by the Constitutional Electoral Act, to make guidelines and regulations and say, look, when this thing happens, because the Electoral Act does not contain everything that it must contain, it says, having given INEC the discretion, INEC says, when and how do we exercise this discretion? So it now filled those gaps in the Electoral Act, so that before the election, everybody knew the conditions under which an election can be declared inconclusive and what will happen. Yes, it's quite right. You fix a date. And that's why they say the Commission gave the reasons why it did so, and now gave a date as 23rd of March. We'll go back and conclude this election. It's inchoate. It's quite right. It's inchoate. Where we disagree with him is that he has not. He's asking that INEC should now remove the discretion. The discretion should be taken away from INEC. That's a normative. Maybe that's what ought to be, but that's not what is. What is now is that INEC, are you satisfied that we can conclude this election without those results? If you are, make a declaration. We say, based on the guidelines that were outlined before the elections, we say, look, this thing falls under those guidelines provisions, so we cannot, regrettably, it's still inchoate. On the 23rd, we'll go there and hopefully we'll conclude the thing. Now, and already the argument is there that the judiciary is playing almost an overbearing role in the process. Too many things. Elections will be won in the field, in the polling units, not in the courtrooms. And the old slogan there, declare me, let them go to court. We're giving way to that. There are administrative powers which we must exercise. It will be shirking our constitutional and statutory duties not to do that and go to court. And the solution is providing, I'm afraid I cannot agree with it, say we should go ex parte. What does that mean? That INEC should now go to a judge and say, Judge, because of this, we want to declare this inconclusive and let's fix a date. I think that's with all due respect, almost a legal absurdity there. And if it's ex parte, will other people not be afforded the opportunity of responding to what INEC says, or what INEC says should be taken as gospel truth, and based on that, just do that and nothing? Even all those ex parte examples he gave, the respondents are given an opportunity, or people who claim property illegally are given an opportunity to say, is this my property, or this is my property, this is how I acquired it. They come back to court. Any time you give an ex parte order, that's without notice to the people, you afford an opportunity for the respondents to always come back and satisfy the judge that maybe, perhaps you were wrong, these are the other facts. So, and there are rights of appeal. So you go all the way to Supreme Court, there'll be a constitutional crisis. Because we must conclude now. We have barely 8 weeks to conclude this process. Because come May 29, in those 29 states, new governors must take over. The tenure expires for the old governors. If we run this judicial process, we'll go all the way to the Supreme Court and come back.
All right, so thank you very much. We're going to also bring you in here. And by the way, just to put you on notice, we have one of our correspondents who will be joining us from Kano via Skype. After Ezenwa, I hope we'll have the clear connection to him in Kano to give us a sense of what played out. Kano is one of the states affected by the inconclusive outcome of the governorship election. Ezenwa, there are two issues on the table from what Festus Oguche says in Port Harcourt and the response by Osaze Ozi. Oguche is saying, look, too much administrative discretion on the basis of saying, look, an election has been declared inconclusive. Why don't you seek judicial review? Osaze Ozi is saying, look, there's already too much judicial review in our electoral process, and plus all the attachments that is made to its own position. What's your own take?
Well, excuse me, judicial oversight has been placed at the end of the process. And part of what the judiciary will be oversighting is whether INEC has exercised this discretion according to the law and according to the guidelines. I think those are clear. Those are clear. So judicial review is not absent. It's not completely absent in the course of the electoral process. So I don't think that we need to stop midway, go get judicial intervention, and then proceed. I think that is in itself inchoate, in my view. Then the next thing is that sometimes, excuse me, I don't think a lot of people understand how INEC works. And I'm not sure that Mr. Uzi are doing enough to put that out. Decisions are, this commission has 13 national commissioners, 2 each from each zone of the country. So these decisions are taken, is a commission. among them people who understand the law, who are lawyers, with the input from also a legal department in taking some of these decisions. So the point for me is, I don't have the luxury today of discussing what INEC, whether INEC has taken that decision in a manner that is open to abuse. I am more interested in saying, why are we leaving out the people who will go and sew military uniform and adorn them on civilians and allow those civilians to run amok and create fiefdoms? If you allow thugs to run amok and kill more people, after they have killed, then you allow them to finish killing people, then you now go to the judge and say, Judge, they have killed 20 people. Should we suspend this election? I think that the onus is on INEC to see that if there is a breach of his own regulations, if there is a breach of the law, it should take that decision. And once it has taken that decision, you can then go back for judicial review when that process is completed. And I don't see the difference. If INEC has a regulation that says if the smart card reader is faulty, that you can proceed the next day, and by the 23rd, this process will be concluded in the polling units where there is overvoting, where there is violence, where there is resistance to the use of smart card reader, and these other things that are clearly spelled out in the law. I am interested in seeing a commission that is strong. And I think we are the ones who talk about strong institutions. What does strong institutions mean? Strong institution means the ability for those institutions to use the laws available to them. We get into the flight, and the pilot says, put off your food. We don't question him. We don't say, why are you telling us to do that? We obey because we understand that it is in our best interest to do so. These instructions that are put in these laws, that are put in these guidelines, are to regulate the conduct of this process. If people willfully violate them and expect that we are going to wait and get to the luxury of somebody interpreting for us whether there has been abuse of discretion, in my humble view, I don't think that is right.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's get across to Kano via Skype. Our correspondent Abdullahi Mustafa, if he's there. You can see him on the right side of the split screen. Abdullahi, good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Kano is one of the states where you had an inconclusive governorship election. What happened?
Thank you, Kingsley, and good morning. As stated in the background report and the contributor from INEC, there was a large difference between the number of votes, the margin between the leading contestant and his closest rival. That is 26,000 ahead of the closest rival and 128,000 council votes. So it's much higher. And that figure was obtained from about 17 local government areas across about 80 polling units. Kano has 8,074 polling units across the 44 local government areas of the state. And reasons given for such cancellations were violence, over-voting, and some incidents of non-use of smart card readers. So these were stated since by the various returning officers from the 44 local government areas when the collation center opened on Sunday, mentioning the number of votes called by each contestant and the number of votes or certain polling units where incidences of cancellations occurred. So the general council was good and successful.
Okay, Kingsley, you might have had some challenges, noticed some challenges during the elections. And do you think that this should be given attention before the next election coming up in Kano with the level of population you have in Kano?
Yes, the challenges, but when considered to the previous election held on the 23rd of February, the challenges were much less. And such were the arrival of voting material to polling centers on time, because there are places where the electoral officers were ready, were on ground as early as 7 o'clock or before 7 o'clock. Accreditation started even few minutes to 8 o'clock. Actually, the main challenge we observed while going around the local government areas was that of failure of card readers in some polling units, and maybe that contributed to the cancellation of the results from the affected areas where there was no cases. There was cases of non-use of card readers, but apart from that, in the process was successful in terms of security, and the issue of security is another factor, of course, because in the 8 metropolitan councils of Kano, where there is high concentration of people, in fact, about 50% of the Kano population is in the 8 metropolitan areas, and there were a few number of security personnel in many polling centers. There are some without a single policeman. So the cases of violence in such areas like Dala, which is second most populous in Kano State after Nasarawa, most of the incidences of violence were found there, and that could be attributed to security, inadequate number of security personnel in many polling units like Gobarawa, areas like Gomaja, Adakawa, and many areas in the ancient city like Madigawa. So that needs to be improved in future elections, especially the rerun that is going to be held in the next few weeks or 2 weeks to come.
Abdullahi, can we have a sense of the actual chronology of events? This is against the background of disparate reports as to what was unfolding in Kano, because the impression was that at some point the results from 43 of the 44 local governments were in, and the only outstanding, which was also said to be a trump card, was from Nasarawa local government area, and that all the results were also said to have been in Nasarawa, and then suddenly, mayhem broke out in that local government area. What actually happened?
Up to around 1 a.m. On Monday, in the early hours of Monday, collation started on Sunday, that is the day after. So the results were flowing in and presented by returning officers. So when it reached 43, that is remaining one, there were reports of violence in the collation center of Nasarawa local government area, and that was the disruption of the process by some representatives of one of the political parties. The result sheet was torn, and there was serious violence there, and that had brought in policemen and arrested those perceived to be the culprits, and were taken to the police headquarters, and they are highly placed people. But that did not stop the process, because the resident electoral commissioner in Kano State, Risco Arabushe, said that will not stop the process. So the results collated from polling units were brought back, and the result for Nasarawa was regenerated. So even before that violence, that disruption, the results were already collected, and the places where there were problems of overvoting and non-use of smart card readers were already identified, and were in Gamma Ward, the biggest or the second largest ward in Nasarawa local government area. So that actually did not affect the result as perceived by many people, because I learned that this was the first time Kano is experiencing inconclusive elections. So that's why many people. But actually, if you're following the process of collation in Kano, that I don't think was the reason behind the declaration of the election inconclusive.
Okay, Abdullah Mustafa, well, thank you very much. We'll keep you on pause in the meantime, along with our correspondent still in Jos, Caleb Gochin, Festus Oguche, analyst from Port Harcourt, and the two guests we have here in the studios, Ezenwa Wangu and Usaze Ozi of INEC. We'll take a short break now.
Team huddle.
But we lost.
Don't be tired, guys. This isn't a loss. It's a practice for winning.
Nothing makes a mother prouder than seeing her child growing up. But I know as he learns to lead, he'll face even more dirt, germs, and risk of illness.
That's why in changing seasons, you need strong Dettol protection. Because Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Growing up needs Dettol protection.
All right, we're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria. Let's bring in again Usaze Ozi, INEC Director of Voter Education and Publicity. Overvoting. Non-use of smart card readers. Whose fault will this be, and therefore, how does liability attach?
Well, overvoting, obviously, the officials who are involved in the process have to be called to explain how that possibly could have happened. That's not the fault of the voters. So the officials who are presiding at that particular unit have to be called in and say, how did this occur? Because ordinarily it should not happen. The very fact that you've seen overvoting means there's something wrong, something fundamentally wrong is there. In the past, there's some who have said, for example, when we did not use smart card reader, they say, oh, the person came for accreditation, but I forgot to tick the register, because when the person comes, apart from before giving the ballot, you should tick the register, and you decide on voting by counting. But that will not avail you now, especially now that the smart card reader is there. But there can be voting where the smart card reader is used to accredit people, but the number is reading X10, and your ticks in the register or your ballots have 15 or 20. That is also overvoting, because you cannot have more people being voting than we are accredited, because accreditation is a prerequisite. It's a precondition for your voting, for your being issued a ballot in the first place. So yes, responsibility must lie with those who are presiding, superintending the process in the polling unit, or where the overvoting occurred. Absolutely.
As in one, overvoting, non-use of smart card readers in the past, of course, we heard there were attempts by persons to circumvent the smart card reader. Oh, no, okay, incident forms, when incident forms were available. But in 2019, INEC was emphatic, no incident forms. Use the smart card reader, otherwise, you call for a replacement. But here we are, some persons in charge of the voting process in some locations circumvented the use of the smart card readers, and we still had overvoting. What, in your opinion, went wrong?
There are we don't need to beat around it. The issue of complicity between polling officials and politicians is the absolute reason for that. And I can tell you, in clear cases, in Imo State, you have cases where a core member sold the smart card reader. Sold it outrightly to a political party.
Is a card reader a POS?
No, it's not. I'm not inventing anything. I observed the elections, and I was in the INEC office when this happened. You saw in the same Imo State where the resident electoral commissioner ordered the arrest on live television of an EO and an SPO for doctoring the results from Idat or South local government. You have reports also of collation officers who are brought from a particular, and that was a discussion that we were having the last time I was here about the propriety of continued use of academics. Right. They came from a particular university, and they ended up in a government house. And INEC had to step them down and had to source that money from Nnamdi Azikiwe University. So the issue of complicity, and the politicians will continue to run around electoral officials, and the resilience, the resistance of some of them are sometimes also under threat. Some of them is, look, you don't do it, you die. You cannot explain people burning down INEC offices, okay? Because perhaps the person who is there refused to do their bidding. People, children, we have it on record, kidnapped the child of a collation officer. These things are there, they are open. So compromise, okay, of electoral officials, and that is what INEC refers to as sabotage. They use that big word and say sabotage. And sometimes those sabotage are internal. So the bigger issue is the play of, politicians and unscrupulous elements within the electoral management body can produce these outcomes that we are talking about. And part of the post-election engagement will be to take a deep look at where these things occurred and ensure that people who got involved in this, are punished. Because we also can't say there is overvoting and we just slide and move on. In those particular places where there is overvoting, we should be able to identify the particular, person who performed that role in that place and hold that person accountable. And I'm happy that INEC tried to do that in 2015, where you have officials of INEC interdicted now, some of them suspended, and some in court, So we shouldn't move on. It's simply a matter of compromise, complicity, and then the desperation, the clear desperation of politicians to ensure that they compromise the process for ill-gotten advantage.
Okay, Ezema, thank you very much. Caleb Gochin in Jos, of course, we've kept you on hold for a pretty long while. Now, the instances that you referred to earlier with regard to the rationale for the declaration of the governorship election on the plateau as being inconclusive, overvoting and non-use of smart card readers. What was your experience like? I mean, Ezema is giving us some vivid description of what transpired. Were there reported incidents of officials who were caught in this act?
No, unfortunately, we didn't get that. But all that we got were those reports of overvoting and non-use of the smart cards. So actually what happened was that the people came out, they did all that they could, they did their best to ensure a peaceful outcome. And unfortunately, whatever happened, those smart card readers people were told, or the officials were asked to at least report to the office of INEC. Those things were not done. And with all the education, actually, we didn't really know why such decisions were taken to let the electorate vote without the use of the smart cards. But I tell you, Plateau people, just like we said some few days ago, they resolved to be peaceful, and they did all that. And whatever it is that the officials did, there was no connivance as far as we are concerned as journalists in the field. We did not get such. But then, just like I said earlier, such issues cannot just happen without somebody who is an official of INEC doing something that is not supposed to do. Yes, the officials have told us there that those people will be called to answer for it, but we cannot, as journalists, we went out to see what happened, and all that we saw was that everything was peaceful. we were not given reasons, or we were not told who were involved. So for me to say, yes, 1 or 2 people got this, no, we don't have that on record here. But honestly, Plateau people, up to this moment that I'm talking, nobody has raised issues concerning INEC. Rather, the people are accusing, are blaming themselves for not doing the right thing. Last time it was when the presidential was declared inconclusive, you heard people blaming INEC for all that happened. But this time around, the people are blaming themselves. Like in local governments where you find so many candidates coming out from the place, like in some zones that you have so many coming out. So the people are now saying, why didn't the politicians come together to agree on who to represent those zones or who to represent those local government areas? So the attention now is turn more on what the people did wrong rather than what INEC did wrong. So in Mangu local government, for instance, we had that local government had the highest number of inconclusiveness. So we have about over 25 or so thousand votes that were not accounted for there. So it means that something actually went wrong. But we cannot say, yes, at this polling unit or at that, this was what actually happened, or this was the role that INEC officials played that brought about that.
Well, Caleb, what is the mood generally like after the elections were declared inconclusive? And in particular, what are the safeguards that the election managers should have in mind on the 23rd when you're supposed to have the supplementary elections?
That's an interesting one. You know, when I was here a couple of days ago, I told you the people of Plateau State have resolved to tow the path of peace, and that they have done conclusively. It is not inconclusive, I'm telling you. So we had no report of any crisis, of anything untoward. Unfortunately, though, I must mention here, we lost one of the members that was re-elected for Pengana constituency in Bassa local government area. That did not come as a result of any crisis or anything of that nature. It was natural. It was after the announcement of the result and in the process of celebrating, he slumped. And that was it. So, Plateau people, the town is calm. People are calm, going out with their activities without any problem. So, the resolve they have kept. And I tell you, they are ready for 23rd of this month for a rerun. All that they're expecting is that let it come and go. All they want to do is to hear is that, yes, the declaration has been made. So whichever way it comes, Plateau people are ready for it. And I'm telling you, they are ready to embrace it.
All right, Caleb Gochin, our correspondent, joining us from Jos, the Plateau State capital, would like to thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria. And let's reconnect Abdullahi Mustafa via Skype in Kano. Abdullahi, if you can hear me, now the Emir of Kano addressed Kano people after the elections were declared inconclusive, suing for peace. Obviously, watchers would imagine that Kano, having been flagged red on the eve of the elections, would be, you know, on some red alert at the moment. Otherwise, what has been the mood in Kano after the polls were declared inconclusive?
Yes. You know, just before the declaration of the elections inconclusive, there were jubilations by supporters of the leading contestant. But after the declaration, immediately there were statements from the two parties. the governing party and the opposition. So, also the royal father, Highness Muhammad Sanusi II, invited newsmen to his palace and addressed people, urged them to remain calm and disregard rumors the previous question you asked me, the declaration as inconclusive was deliberate, that everything done was thanks to the provisions of the Electoral Act. And we thank God that Kano is calm. And everybody is now going about his normal business, and people, the attention has now moved to preparation for the rerun, which is coming up soon. Any concern of breach of law in Kano, everything is now normal here.
All right, Abdullahi Mustafa, our correspondent, joining us via Skype from Kano. Thank you very much for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria. All right, very quickly, let's go over. We have some tweets, by the way. Before we take those tweets, let's return to Port Harcourt. Festus Oguche, of course, I know you probably will have one or two reactions to the points made by two guests here with us with regard to your position for additional judicial review before an election is declared inconclusive on the grounds that you already stated. But in addition to that, I just would like to ask, in terms of liability for the causative factors for the inconclusiveness of the elections, overvoting, for instance, or non-use of smart card readers, which would appear to be a flagrant disregard of extant regulations by INEC, shouldn't liability attach almost immediately? Plus, of course, all the other incidents of violence. Shouldn't this, be dealt with rather speedily so that the appropriate lessons are meted out?
Yes, thank you very much. We really look forward to the date that there will be judicial pronouncement on the validity or otherwise of inconclusive. The sections 26, 50, and 53, and section 40 of the Electoral Act, and section 47 of the INEC regulations and guidelines is yet to be interpreted by the courts, and we look forward to it, so there cannot be a clear-cut issue on that. But what is important, why I'm not quarreling with to suspend the polls, to adjourn for supplementary polls as when circumstances call for it. My quarrel is with the word inconclusive, because it is never used anywhere, either in the Electoral Act or the INEC regulations and guidelines. My quarrel. We really look forward to that. But like I said, it is something that it will not even take time. I talked about an ad hoc judge who is readily available within a space of 20, 30 minutes to be done. Or even if it's the recourse to court will not be had, is there any provision anywhere or any action anywhere by the office inconclusive that is opposed to an affidavit to that effect, stating the facts and the grounds of his action? Such grounds and facts that can be verifiable and can be sustained for any subsequent decision with regards to the polls. That's the issue. But then, what is important also is the fact that system right, whichever way you want it. It has to be right. For the inconvenience of time and maybe inconvenience of speed, we cannot sacrifice thoroughness. Because as far as I'm concerned, when a process is ongoing and the system has been invoked towards a particular process, it has an end. If it doesn't get to that end, it is a very fundamental issue that cannot be decided or determined by the body saddled with the responsibility of executing that end, or by the official of that body, no matter how it is called. We leave it all to whatever. But important is that if you say it's judicial review will be very cumbersome in this extent. Somebody is talking about going to challenge the inconclusiveness of his election. And if you say judicial review is the option, then if you go to court, and the issue now becomes, what was the input of the stakeholders, the contestants involved prior to our declaration of inconclusiveness? What would the judge do? For the fact that you did not hear from them, they did not make any input, it was a unilateral decision, that decision will be nullified automatically. We know how judicial review works. Certiorari will apply to quash that proceedings if you do not put into consideration the rights and interests of the country.
All right, Mr. Festus Oguche, sorry we lost your signal there, but we'll come back to sign you up. Just very quickly, Mr. Osazelzi. Now, tomorrow, INEC has already advertised that it will be issuing the certificates of return to the members elected of the National Assembly. One name is, shall we say, famously missing from your website, as has been reported, and that's the governor, outgoing governor of Imo State. Was his election also inconclusive?
No, what we did say was that anybody who's, I think, very ably captured by my colleague, that, look, we will not reward bad behavior. On the contrary, misbehavior should not be rewarded, it should be punished. So anybody who has put a gun to the head or threatened violence for the returning officer to sign a return for them, that is not a return, an independent act, a consensual act of the returning officer. So that not being his act, no valid return has been made. If we are wrong, come challenge in court. We will not reward that. We will not give certificates to anybody. And it's not only just one person. Anybody and everybody, and there's several names, a couple of names missing on that list, they will not get certificates of return.
So those elections are also inconclusive or left open, or
they have not been concluded because the return officer has to make a return.
A return, okay.
It's possible he will return the same people, I don't know, but he will make a call based on the facts before him. If whoever satisfies the conditions by law, because when he's going to make a return, he said, look, X has called the highest number of lawful votes cast and met the conditions for a return. If you haven't met those conditions, he will not return you. But if you've met those conditions, his duty is to return you. For now, he has not made that return.
What
so
if he doesn't?
If he doesn't...
Is there going to be elections again in that area?
Is the returning officer, his say is final and can be challenged in a tribunal or court of law.
All right, very quickly, we'll go through some of the tweets. Among Bola, Daddy Gio has this tweet. I sincerely hope Nigerians, particularly those on the social media, can tune into the NTA to listen to why elections in some states were declared inconclusive. Many narratives trending on the social media are accusing Mr. President that he wants to rig in his party.
And Dele Jackson Solomon tweeted, please, 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 we need peace and tranquility in Nigeria. No politician's ambition is worth the lives of the good people of this country. INEC should seek caution and must be meticulous in the conduct of the rerun elections. The people must stand and not be subverted.
Habila Kwarazakshi tweets, I would like INEC to explain the basis for cancellation of results from Tafawa Balewa local government area. The returning officer admitted to the fact that the result was genuine. The election was free and fair, but the result was entered in the wrong form. That's the claim by Habila Kwarazakshi.
And Igbatigbi Zekeri tweeted, the inconclusive elections we are witnessing today is not surprising. Before the introduction of card readers in 2015, our vote never counted. Politicians will sit and write results, but the narrative is gradually changing today. They may try to beat the system, but we'll get there.
Festus Akimboyewa, proportional representation must be included in our electoral process. It will go a long way to reduce the irregularities and violence associated with our elections.
Terry Abdul Karim tweeted, we say no to inconclusive, but we must reflect back to where we were. Inconclusive seems strange. Yes, that is because what we were having before 2015 was never an election. People's votes must be counted. Creating a deliberate disruption scene to cancel election must be resisted.
Omen Carlo tweets, inconclusive election is not bad. It shows transparency, but our fear is hiding under a conclusive election to manipulate the result.
Ibrahim Modu Aji tweeted, extreme desperation from politicians must arise in the supplementary elections. Politicians will employ everything in their means to ensure victory, either by hook or crook. This is the main disadvantage of declaration of inconclusive elections, and litigations might arise.
Now, Terry Zachary tweets, the use of card readers is not helping some politicians. Now, they can't easily write results any longer. So in order to beat the system, they have now resorted to violence in most of their opponents' strongholds as a means of cancelling those elections. But INEC wants to ensure that every vote counts.
Kingsley, we have so many tweets. Mohammed Mustafa tweeted, some people are asking INEC to declare winners in inconclusive states when the council vote is higher than the margin in many polling units. Do most Nigerians not witness the inconclusiveness in previous elections before? Is it just to fill the blank where there's no election therein?
All right, I think those are the tweets that we can accommodate. On that note, we'd like to thank all our remaining guests on the program. Festus Oguche, constitutional lawyer and public affairs analyst, joining us from our Port Harcourt network studios. Always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria. And here in the Abuja studios, our appreciation one more time to the chairman of Partners for Electoral Reform, Ezewan Wangu. Always a delight. And Osaze Uzi, that's Wole Osaze Uzi, director of Voter Education and Publicity of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Thank you very much for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so that does it for us on the program today. Well, thank you for tuning in. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Thanks for watching.